Hello again, everybody. I hope you guys have had another good week. So congratulations, we have made it to the end of our perspective unit. We have been working up to this the entire semester. You finally have designed and illustrated your own building in perspective, which is really awesome. And perspective is not an easy thing, which I'm sure you guys know. It takes really a certain type of personality to like perspective and to like the attention to detail that you really need to be good at it. And I'm very proud of you guys for making it through this. I know this is the part in the semester where people tend to start getting really overwhelmed. So hang in there. I know we're missing quite a few of you this week, but I'm happy that a lot of you did reach out to me to tell me if you were going to be late. I really do appreciate that. It helps to know, I like to know that you're there and that you're still trying, even if things do come in late. So I think that's great. I will say, though, for those of you who handed in, I am a little disappointed at some of you this week. I feel like we've been talking about perspective for so long, and you guys have done a really great job, and then we get to this perspective illustration, and there was a good handful of you who did your thumbnails and maybe roughly figured out where some horizon line or vanishing points would be. But then you got to the perspective illustration and you didn't do it. You didn't find a horizon line. You didn't find vanishing points. You just kind of winged it, which goes against everything we've talked about so far. So I'm a little disappointed in a good handful of you for this. So I'm sorry. I just wish you guys had followed through on all the steps because we've been talking about it for so long. I'll mention it too when I get to you guys, but I did want you guys to know that I'm a little disappointed. Perspective, you have to always map everything out. You have to always find the horizon, always find the vanishing points. You can't do perspective drawing without that. So, a little disappointed you guys didn't follow through. So please keep that in mind in the future. You can't really wing it when it comes to perspective. It takes time, it takes attention to detail. Okay, but other than that, I do think we have a lot of good results here. So let's get into this. You really only had to do like two major things this week. You just had to do your thumbnails, which was envisioning the different viewpoints of where the camera would be, kind of like your composition of your perspective drawing. And then you had to do your perspective drawing, which is this building you've been designing, for these past 2 weeks. You have to now take it, put it into perspective. And then as always, you had to, hand in your Photoshop file and you had to make a nice model sheet showing off your building. Okay, trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention. If you guys are hearing any noise in my background, my cats are making a total mess behind me trying to get into the cabinet. So if you hear any loud bangs in the background, that's just them. Okay, so let's get into this. I think I'm going to go from the middle down this week. Okay, so I'm going to start Christopher, nothing from you, Joseph, Cameron, Nick, so you're behind, but you're catching up, which is great. You did hand in your building. This is late, but overall, I think you've done a decent job here. Just make sure your dome is a dome. It doesn't look circular right now, and this should be a perfect circle. So that's the only thing I'm going to mention as you go forward here. Chio, nothing. Juliana. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We have your thumbnails. Make this a little bit bigger. So your thumbnails, I think you did a decent job here. I think you did play around with different viewpoints. The only thing is these three are pretty much the same viewpoint. And I did say you can play around with, similar viewpoints, zooming in and zooming out. But when you only have 5 thumbnails and 3 of them are, literally just straight ahead here, I wish you had more variety. So you did lose a couple points for that. Bravo for you for going for a 3-point perspective drawing. I think that's very bold, especially since we haven't really talked a lot about 3-point perspective, but I recognize that, you liked this viewpoint and wanted to go ahead with it. The problem is you didn't figure out your perspective. And actually, I went into your Photoshop file and kind of played around. So when you did this, did you figure out where your horizon line is? Did you figure out where your vanishing points are? I can see a horizon here, but when I followed your lines, none of them are going back to, they're not converging to one point, which they should. You got the length, the width, and the height. They're sort of converging towards an area, but I mean, look at where these are all over the place. These aren't all going to match at one spot. And more importantly, they're not going to match at one spot that's on the horizon line. We've talked about this for so long that your 2-point perspective, one vanishing point on the horizon line, another vanishing point on the horizon line, and I can see your horizon line right here. So you did not take the time to figure out the perspective, which is the whole point of this assignment. So you're going to lose a lot of points for that. I really wish you had figured it out. I mean, you're so close. Like, you have the right idea of what this viewpoint should look like. I do think your horizon line for being 3-point perspective, I think your horizon line probably would end up being a little bit higher. And your third vanishing point here would probably be a little bit lower. I think if you move the horizon line up, that would be okay. Right now, I think the horizon line's too low, and the third vanishing point, well, roughly, wherever that third vanishing point would be, is a little bit too close. That's the only thing I would say, but once again, you didn't actually find vanishing points. So no horizon line, no vanishing points. This is not a perspective drawing, unfortunately. And I was just looking at to see if it looks like what you did previously. I mean, you did have this kind of crooked thing that was going on here in your isometric. But so it does still have that kind of crooked look to it, but it should still follow in perspective in some way. It does feel a little bit longer than your house. Your house doesn't feel like that long. And like, look how skinny and narrow it feels here. And that's because this doesn't have a proper vanishing point, and it's way too long. It's hanging over too long there. So, it doesn't quite match up. But overall, though, I like your model sheet here. Looks nice. I think you laid this out really well, showing off the 3 different views here. I mean, it definitely looks like a similar building, even though your proportions are a little bit off. I'm just kind of disappointed you didn't actually figure out the perspective. But that's it. Otherwise, I think it's a nice looking building. Okay, let's move on here. Meg, still waiting on yours. Christian, Evelyn. Okay, so Evelyn, let's look at your thumbnails here. Your thumbnails are decent. I do think you are zoomed in really close in a lot of these. I do wish there was at least one where we could see kind of the whole building in one. We're kind of close on this first one, which is nice. But the others, I think you're getting a little too zoomed in. I would like you to take a step back, show off your building. Oops. But otherwise, I think this came out good. I think you have a nice variety of viewpoints here. The problem is, I don't think you chose the best viewpoint. Compositionally wise, when we look at this here, I mean, your building is taking up, it's not even half the page. You have all this empty space, and the whole point of this assignment is you're doing a perspective drawing of your building to show off your building, and I don't think you chose the right viewpoint for that. We see more background here than we see building. And then on top of that, your perspective for your building is wrong. So I went and opened up your Photoshop file here and kind of played around. Thankfully, you did find a horizon line and vanishing points, but you didn't use them all. So you can see I marked this up here. So you made this vanishing point here. You used it for the top of the building. You have this, the roof here is going back to that vanishing point. But then what about this side here? This side of this building, all these lines should be receding back to that same vanishing point, like I kind of drew out here in the green. So you didn't follow that for here. And if you had done this at this angle, then your perspective would have been good. So you're nearly there. You are doing a lot of things that are right. I'm happy, like the side of this here, all these lines, this side of the building is all going back to the vanishing point, which is excellent. I think you did a great job with that. But you lost the side of this building. So that as well, you lost some points for too. But I am happy you did attempt to find the vanishing points and horizon lines. I'm very happy to see that. But again, as I said, I don't think this is the best viewpoint. If this was more centered and so we could see a little bit more of the building, that would have been nice. Maybe you were trying to do it like this so you wouldn't have to deal with less perspective. I could see that happening. I just wish there was a better viewpoint. It just doesn't show it off nicely. And compositionally, it feels a little unbalanced. When you're designing a page, you want to think about what your focus is, and you want to think about where, you want your viewer's eye to go. Where do you want them to look? And for me, I'm looking over here. Like I'm following this kind of path here to the background. This is where I'm looking. I am like not paying attention to this. This kind of feels like something, in the foreground that's not supposed to be in our attention, and our focus is back here. So that's just my thoughts on that. But good news is you did the extra credit, which is super going to help you this week. That really makes a big difference. And I think this is a nice layout that you put together here with your isometrics, your orthographic, and your illustration here. So other than that, you did a nice job. I'm very happy you did the extra credit. I think your design of your schoolhouse is very nice. I would just like to have seen a little bit more with your perspective drawing. Okay, moving on. Derek, still waiting on yours. Okay, Mahtab, so you did fix your orthographic. You finished it up, added the domes, and your isometric. I see you fixed too, or sorry, your orthographic you fixed, your isometric you finished. There we go. So you fixed this, so now they all line up, which looks great. So glad. I'm very happy you fixed that and handed in. Your thumbnails are really good here. You got a variety of different viewpoints, some close up, some farther away. Even tried a 3-point perspective. Very happy to see that. So that's all great. Where I am disappointed though is your perspective drawing, because it looks like you just took your thumbnail and you didn't figure out any more perspective other than this. It looks like you just enlarged your thumbnail, which in my videos, I did take my thumbnail and bring it over to my perspective drawing, but then after I got it in there, I then found my horizon line, found my vanishing points, and refined it. And I didn't really see you refining it. I opened up your Photoshop file here and kind of played around. So when I see what you did here, so this was basically your thumbnail that's been enlarged. But when I look at your vanishing points, so I didn't see any hint in your perspective file that you did find a horizon line or vanishing points. I didn't see anything like that. So I just kind of did it myself. And I found when I did find vanishing points, you mostly were following vanishing points, but then there's certain parts like this part here, and this part up here is not going to that same vanishing point. And the same thing on this side too, where most lines are, but then you got this piece right here that's not going to the vanishing point. So it looks like, when doing your thumbnail, you roughly figured out perspective, which is fine. Your thumbnails don't have to be like totally fully rendered with everything figured out perfectly, but that's what the perspective drawing is for. When you did the perspective drawing, you should have fixed these issues. And then on top of that, I think this doesn't quite match up with what you drew here for your isometric. I think the big thing is like the depth of this and the proportions of this. So we look at your isometric here. It's very tall and long. Like we look at these like panels on the side here, like looking how tall they are, and there's very little space in between each. But then we look at this here, they are much more stretched out. You definitely you stretched this out too much. I think there's way too much space between these. There should be less space. Everything should be brought forward here. Your designs on here, you didn't even center this. You didn't even find like where the center is. This, it's very rushed is the feeling I'm getting here. Your designs, you didn't take any real care in making your designs match up here. And then there's other things like, I don't think you figured out this ellipse. This doesn't quite feel right. And then this too, I don't know what this is. This doesn't match up with what's happening here. This looks like it's bigger than the tower. And also it's too low. According to the perspective, you have it, this thing is the same height as right here. But we look at your building, this is actually like all the way up to this, nearly this top dome. So this is way too low. From this viewpoint, we wouldn't see this design at all. And you can see like this too feels way too long and stretched. You didn't even match all the details. Like you have this kind of like border on here and you didn't do that. It just feels rushed. I just don't see the, the attention to detail that I know you have and I know you normally do in your work. This just doesn't feel like it. And your brush gets a little chunky in some area. I wish you were a little bit more refined. There is somewhat sense of a background in the fact that you did color in for a sky and a ground, but I wish there was a little bit more sense of lighting. Yeah, honestly, it's I think you could do better. That's really it. Good news is you did do the extra credit too. You did your front, side, and top view, which will help your grade immensely. So it won't hurt you in the long run here. But I feel like you could have done a better job. I know you're good at this here. You're good at perspective. But that's it. I think your model sheet's pretty decent. Maybe your illustration here could have been a little bit bigger, but other than that, I think it's pretty good for a model sheet here. It is nice and clean. You just have a little bit of extra empty space here. Might have been able to balance a little bit better, but otherwise that's it. I think your building is nice. You definitely pushed yourself with a super complicated building, which makes obviously more work for you, but make sure in the future, spend the time, find your horizon line and your vanishing points. Don't just trust whatever you roughed out in your thumbnail. The thumbnail is just an idea. You still have to, put it all together. Okay, let's move on here. Nicholas, so you did take my advice on the viewpoint for your building, which is great. The only problem here, when I look at your thumbnails, I do wish you tried some other angles. I know I did recommend what I thought would probably be the best one, but I think you still could have played around with other viewpoints. I mean, these are essentially 4 of the same viewpoints. You did play around with it by rotating it and slightly changing, the camera angle a little bit, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more variety here. I wanted to see you think about it, but you did. I can see you doing 2, 1, and 3-point perspective-ish on here. So I can see you thinking about it, which is good. I think you could do a little bit more. But anyway, moving on though, your perspective illustration is so great. It's exactly what I was envisioning, and I think you just brought it to life. Let's look at, I did open up your Photoshop file. I found, your horizon line, vanishing points, all look great. I wish I could see how you figured out the ellipses. I know you did because, we talked about this, but I wish I could have seen like the work you did to figure out the ellipses on here, but they look right. They feel like they match your perspective here where your horizon line is. And I think the mountains look really nice. The only thing I would just mention here is it does seem like your mountains just like stop when they hit the horizon. And, mountains, and there is a transition, it doesn't just go from flat ground to mountains like that. I mean, the background is not what this illustration is about, so I'm not taking any points off for that. Just something to think about. in the future here. And maybe even getting a little bit of texture, a little more texture. You actually do have a nice, there are little hints of texture here from your brush, which are nice, but maybe even a little bit more. But that's nitpicking because your illustration here is really great. You have a sense of lighting, like this little bit of shadow you put on either side here makes it feel like this center here is glowing, which is excellent. So, I mean, this looks great. I really have no complaints here. I absolutely love this. I think your perspective came out great. Your viewpoint, your model sheet here looks really nice. Yeah, I think this is all excellent. I can see you ended up not showing the ramp on here, which we actually would have seen a little bit of it. I was curious to see how you would have attacked that, but that's okay. If you don't have it, this looks great. Okay, moving on. Yeah, I think you really just lost points this week for the thumbnails because I wanted to see more views. Just looking again at my notes. Otherwise, everything else you did this week was excellent. Okay, great work. Moving on. So, Sydney, let's see, your thumbnails here. Thumbnails here were really good. I like the viewpoints you were doing here. You just have one major problem, unfortunately, when it came to following directions. So it does say specifically on the assignment sheet that you are illustrating an exterior of a building, not an interior. So it looks like you spent a lot of time on this. Your perspective on this looks accurate. I went back somewhere here. I did find this in your Photoshop file. You did figure out your perspective, but unfortunately, this isn't what the assignment is. If you think about it, we've spent 2 weeks, we spent 2 weeks designing a building. You designing all these exterior views of this building. And then you get this perspective assignment, this perspective drawing, which is the culmination of this whole assignment. And you draw an interior, which we have not designed the interior at all. We've only been designing the exterior. So, unfortunately, I can't give you any credit for your perspective drawing. I'm sorry. It looks like you spent, time and effort on this, but it's not the assignment. I want to see an illustration of the exterior of your building. If for some reason you're afraid of, doing the ellipses for the tower here, you can focus on this side of the building where it's rectangular and you won't really see the ellipses. If that's what you're concerned about, there are other viewpoints you could choose, but I'm sorry, I can't give you credit for it. So that's where you're going to lose a lot of points this week, as everything else you did this week is great. All your other steps look really awesome. Your model sheet, I think you could have balanced this a little bit more. Like this bottom one feels a little bit close to the bottom. I would have moved it up a bit. Maybe make this a little bit smaller. You don't even need the 2 extra ones here. You could have just, done the view that you did. But still, maybe you could have laid out a little bit better. But all your points you really lost this week were your perspective illustration. So I'm sorry. I really want to give you credit for it, but it's not what the assignment is. It's got to be an exterior view. So you can still redo it. That is totally possible. You can redo your perspective illustration of a view from the outside. Yeah, I think try views from, I love that you did this here where you're thinking. I think your view of, there's one right here where it looks like you're kind of looking from the side. It might be your 2, but I feel like, that's a lot farther away than where that your little guys are here. But I think if you picture someone like standing right here looking at it and looking at this piece here, maybe you could try that, or even a 1-point perspective. If you don't feel comfortable doing 2, you could have a 1-point perspective where 5 is right here, where you're standing right here looking towards the front of the building. I mean, that would be great. It's basically the opposite of this shot here. So I would try those. as I know you can do it, because your perspective on this is great, and I'm very happy to see that, and happy to see you did figure out your horizon line and vanishing points, all the stuff that I was complaining on other ones. But I'm sorry. Please, feel free to redo it. You can send me an email if you want to talk about it, but sorry. Otherwise, everything looks great. I love your design. Okay, let's move on here. Cam. Oh, your cam, yours looks excellent. You did hand in your reference folder. I got that. Very happy. Your thumbnails are excellent. I think you got some nice viewpoints here. I mean, this one's a little bit of a throwaway. This one's a little too close. But you do have, you have 6 here. So I think these are nice. And then your perspective drawing looks great. So you went for 1 point perspective. I found your work here in your Photoshop file, and this all looks excellent. There's only one thing that I think could have used a little bit more attention. That's not quite right. And it's this part here, this opening where everything is receding backwards. Remember when we were doing measuring line way back then, remember the gap, if the gap between these should get narrower and narrower the closer you get to the horizon. And right now, like, this is very inconsistent. Like, some of these are big, some of these are more narrow. It does kind of feel like it's getting narrower as it's going back, but I can tell you didn't figure it out because it should be more drastic than what's here. You just kind of eyeballed this. And then the same thing with these edges here, like this kind of, this like corner, you should have figured out, you should have used that vanishing point to figure out like the distance between them here and lined it up like I did. And then they would have fit within that. Because right now they're kind of like bouncing all over the place. It's kind of a minor thing. I mean, everything else you did looks really great. It is 1 point perspective, but I think you did it, sometimes 1 point perspective can be boring depending on what the viewpoint is, but this was a really great viewpoint that you did, and I think it came out really interesting, and I think it shows off your building nicely. Yeah, that's the only problem here, and I would have done a measuring line to figure out these receding backward. What I would have done is, if you extended this up here and then made a measuring line that goes across here, where you divide it up evenly and then make a measuring point, then you could have figured out exactly where these would have been. So that was the only thing that I found that could use some fixing. But other than that, I mean, nice sense of lighting on here. I think that looks excellent. Love your model sheet, looks really great. Yeah, you did an excellent job this week. It's only I think your thumbnail. And, thumbnail, you may have lost a point just because, some of these were a little bit close up, but a little bit too close. I mean, that this is, it's not a view that you would really do, if you want to show off your building. But, yeah, other than that, excellent job. Okay. Adam. Okay, Adam. So you actually went and did color, which this is a black and white class. You did not need to do color. It looks really nice. I do love your like sunset you have going on here, and the lighting is very, very nice. So you probably spent more time on it than you needed to, because we did not need to do color, and color takes a little bit longer, but I could see you cared about this illustration, which is really nice. You really put the time and effort into this, which I love. So you went for 1 point perspective, which is good. I think it's, you get to see your bridge, you get to see the building here. There's only a couple little things I would comment. I went into your original version here. I found found where you have your horizon line and vanishing point, looks great. The only issue I have is that, this is what I was trying to figure out. If you were standing on the bridge here, you can see like this is where like the peak of the bridge is and it's coming down. That means you'd be standing right here. If you were standing here, the bridge would be blocking the view. You wouldn't be able to see, all of this. You wouldn't be able to see the ground right here. if your horizon line is this low. I think, yeah, that's what I kind of sketched out here. I think for your horizon line to be that low and for you to be on this side of the bridge, this is kind of what I drew here. Like for your horizon line to be this low, like right where you have it here, you'd have to be like laying on the ground on the bridge right here. But then, you could see the bridge would be in your way and you wouldn't be able to see. So that's the only thing I wanted to point out. It's a harder thing to figure out because it's this kind of, it's a bridge. It's this sloping arch type thing. So I just wanted you to think about that. I think if you wanted to do this viewpoint of someone standing on the bridge, I think your horizon line should have been a little bit higher. That's what this kind of is. I'm envisioning if you were standing on the bridge, here's the bridge kind of like in the way, blocking any of that. But I also do want to point out, you did figure out your vanishing point here, but then you didn't use it for your little lanterns here. I think the distance, first of all, between this lantern and this lantern is too far apart. Like based on your illustration, like they don't look that far apart. And I think, when you take diminution into account here, I think they're too far apart. I think there's too much space. And then also you should have followed your vanishing point. You should have used your vanishing point because if this is where they were seeing backwards and if these two are in a straight line, they might be a little bit at an angle. Actually, it probably is a little bit wider. That's actually an interesting thing now that I think about it. Because I was going to say, your path here, if your path was in 1 point perspective and perfectly straight, that's what these two lines are. Your path is actually too narrow. It should be coming out at these angles. So it should be even wider than what you have. And actually, now that I'm looking again at your isometric, it does even get wider. It's not a perfectly straight path. So if anything, this actually should have been a little bit wider than I even put here. And then what happens is where your little lanterns here, if you had just taken a line and what I did here, if you've taken a line from your vanishing point, extend it through the bottom of this one here and out, then your next lantern, if it's in a straight line, the bottom of it will hit here. And then if you were to draw a line going through the top of them would all line up from your horizon line. So you can see that's why I put this here. I think it would be much higher than what you have. It wouldn't be that far down, and they'd be closer together and bigger. Right now, I think it'd be even bigger than what you have here. So that's what those lines are. And then this is my my line for like the bridge. So those are things I want you to think about. I think it's a lot of it's it's technical stuff, but obviously this is perspective. It's all technical stuff. But I think you had the right idea. I just want to make sure you're taking into account, the size of things and how they would stack in front of each other. Anyway, so yeah, I honestly, I think if this was me, I would have just moved the horizon line a little bit higher, and then I think you could have gotten away with this viewpoint here. It still would have needed some tweaks, but then I think we would have been able to see over the bridge a little bit more, if the horizon line was a little bit higher. Anyway, overall though, I think you did a really nice job with your illustration here. I think it looks excellent. It's got atmosphere, which is what I really love about it. And that's a hard thing, and it's something we don't, I don't even talk about in this class. That sense of atmosphere, that sense of light, it doesn't just feel like, oh my gosh, my cats behind me are making a total mess. Sorry. But it feels like, there's a sense of light here. It's a sense of atmosphere. There's a mood to it. I love it. I really do. I love what you did, even though you don't get any extra points for doing color. But I can tell you cared about this. So that's how you could fix it. Okay, moving on. Great job. Nathaniel, nothing from you. Ian, nothing from you. Jimmy. Okay, so Jimmy, let's get to your thumbnails here. So, oops. So you have this really great castle that you designed here. I love your castle. you get to your thumbnails, and your thumbnails are all so close up. You know, they're so zoomed in. You don't have a single view where we actually get to see, you know, the castle. It's all like super tight on like really narrow things. And the whole idea of this is you're supposed to be, you know, doing an illustration of your building. It doesn't have to have the whole thing, but you're supposed to be showing it off. Like, that's the whole point of this. And all of your viewpoints are so close up that you can't appreciate what your building is. And then the one you chose, you know, it's same thing, you know, obviously it does not show off your building. I have no idea what kind of building this is other than the fact that it's made of stone. But the bigger problem is that you didn't figure out the perspective. So you did the same thing, you know, I mentioned on some other people where you did this thumbnail, where you have, you know, a hint, you have an idea of what the perspective is. But then when you went to the perspective illustration, you never figured out the perspective. And that's what I have here. So I had opened up your Photoshop file. I couldn't find any sketches or anything where you found the horizon line or vanishing points. I couldn't see anything where you are attempting to do this. And then when I tried to find your vanishing points, this is what this is here. You can see your receding lines going to the left. These are not converging. Remember, the lines that are receding are supposed to converge at a point on your horizon line. In this side too. I mean, this side, they some of them look like they're converging, but they're going off to all different spots. There is no horizon line here. There are no vanishing points. This is not a perspective illustration. So you lost a ton of points on this because it's not a perspective drawing. No horizon line, no vanishing points, not perspective. And it's, you know, obviously way too close. But even if you had done this close view, if you had at least figured out the perspective, I would have at least, you know, given you more points on that. So if you go back, find a horizon line, make your vanishing points, and fix this, then I'll give you more credit for it. If you want to fix your grade. It's just disappointing. I know you can do better than this here. It just seems like you rushed it. It literally just seems like you took your thumbnail here and enlarged it and then put a little bit more shading on it. I know you did redraw it. I looked at your Photoshop file. It does look like you redrew it, but you know, what's the point if you didn't figure out the perspective on it? So, a little disappointed, unfortunately. Your model sheet though look good. I mean, look at this. I love these these two views here, orthographic and the isometric. Like, I want to see this cool building, and then we get this, and it's like, what is this? So, sorry about that. I do wish you had put a little bit more effort into that there. And I think that's it. Jonathan, nothing from you. Okay, so I know I'm missing a bunch of you, but most of you have talked to me, so fine with that. But you guys who got it in, you know, really good job. Even if maybe your perspective illustrations aren't quite where I'd hope yet, I think you guys have done a really good job with perspective this semester. Perspective is not an easy thing, as you guys know, and it takes a long time to really, you know, understand all the rules for it. And to be honest, I've only skimmed the surface here. There's a lot more rules when it comes to perspective, especially when you start to get objects that are not parallel to each other. Then they're all going to start having different vanishing points, and things get wholly complicated here. But there's a whole lot more. If anyone is interested in more information on perspective, I have some perspective books I could recommend to you, so just ask me and I'll let you know. But I think perspective is a really awesome thing. I love it personally. So I hope you guys at least enjoyed it. We are moving on to anatomy now, which anatomy still takes some perspective into account. You know, perspective still exists, so don't forget everything we just learned so far. But it's a little bit freer, I feel like, in the anatomy section. So it's kind of a nice way to end the semester here. I mean, we've only got, after this, we have 2 more minor assignments and then 1 major assignment, and that's it. You know, we have a month left. We're almost done here, you guys, so hang on a little bit longer, okay? Okay, otherwise, great work, you guys. I'll see you again next week.